Hello, good afternoon. This is Time with PIAC, and we welcome you specially to our first edition for this year. As always, we come your way with educative and insightful discussions on the management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. Today promises to be another educative session as we focus on the use of petroleum revenues across different projects in the country. More specifically, we'll be looking at projects that the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, inspected in 2024. We'll get into the details of that shortly. I'll be joined by my guest, and then we'll provide some perspectives on this particular subject. Remember, this is an interactive session, so you can send in your questions and your comments, and we'll respond to them as the discussion progresses. I am Jessica, a champion. Joining me today is a PIAC member, Mr. Richard Elima. He represents CSOs. I also have Mr. Edward Yao Efriye. He's also a PIAC member who represents the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And finally, I have Mr. Emmanuel KD Japan, and he is the technical officer at the PIAC Secretariat. Gentlemen, you are welcome to Time with PIAC.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
I know that the discussion is going to be very interesting. And for Mr. Elima, I think this is his second time on PIAC. So I'll say a special welcome to the newbies. Yes. That's Mr. Efriye and Emmanuel Japan. So today we are looking at a very particular topic that people are really interested in, which basically translates into how the revenues are being used, because people really want to see what the petroleum revenues are being used for. So before we get into the discussion of the projects you inspected and all of that, we want to just provide some perspective on what PIAC is and then what exactly is your role when it comes to petroleum revenue management. I think Mr. Efriye will start. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I want to start by saying hello to our viewers and our listeners across the country and the world. I'm sure we are being heard all over the globe. And just back to your question, PIAC is an entity or a body that is independent. And this body was established by an act in 2011 called the Petroleum Revenue Management Revenue Act. So it's a body that really seeks to promote transparency and also accountability in terms of the oil and gas that we produce in this country. So basically, that is what PIAC is.
Okay, so Mr. Lima, I'll come to you at this point. What exactly is your role when it comes to petroleum revenue management in Ghana?
Well, thank you very much. Before I delve into the specific roles, it's also important to add, for the benefit of listeners, that PIAC is a creation of a citizen's outcry or a citizen's desire for effective, efficient, transparent, and accountable management of our natural resources generally. You know, it came on the back of an outcry that our mining revenues have not been utilized well. So when we got the petroleum, everybody said, well, let's set in place some structures to ensure we do the right thing this time. So that is how come PIAC was inserted into the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Now, in terms of specific rules, first of all, we monitor the implementation of the Act, and by extension, the management of petroleum revenues. You know, government receives petroleum revenues, and it is our duty to just monitor how government utilizes this revenue, who receives the revenues, and the allocations and all that. We monitor at every step of the way. The second thing we do is to do advocacy. We look at international best practices elsewhere. How have other countries managed their revenues? How come Norway is cited as a best example and Nigeria is cited as the worst example for us? You know, we look at all these, and then based on it, we make recommendations for the adoption of very good practices to manage our own resources. And then finally, we also do education. At the end of the day, petroleum revenues must benefit the people. So we do education, we sensitize them for them to know how their revenues are being utilized. We empower them with knowledge, we empower them with information, and they use this information to also hold our authorities accountable.
So let me bring in Emmanuel at this point. When we mention ABFA funded projects, which is actually the subject matter of our discussion today. What exactly are they?
Thank you, Jessica. So when we mention ABFA-funded projects, these are developmental projects which are either infrastructure in nature or goods and services. And these are funded through the national budget.
Mr. Friye, let me bring you in at this point. What actually prompted PIAC to start these inspections of projects?
Okay, so as my colleague rightly said, we have three main mandates. One of the mandates gives us the power to do an independent assessment of the work that the petroleum revenue is used for. So it's one of the tools that we can also use to assess whether the revenues from the oil and gas are used properly. And that is how come I think since 2016, the committee has taken it upon itself to start project inspection activities.
So if you are just joining us, this is Still Time with PIAC, and today we are taking a look at some projects that the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, inspected in 2024. And my guests have so far told us what PIAC is and what exactly their role is when it comes to petroleum revenue management in terms of education, in terms of independent assessment, and then advocacy. We will be getting into the details of the projects that the committee inspected in 2024 shortly. But before that, I want Emmanuel to run us through what processes you go through before you actually go to the field to inspect these projects.
Okay, thank you. So before the committee does these inspections, the first thing that we do is to select regions where we want to undertake these inspections. The next thing that we'll do from there is to actually create a criteria for this selection. It could be based on the cost of the project, also based on the type of project, which could be either health, education, or even water supply. What we also do to actually get this project done is to do them by tip-off, where we would get some information from citizens that would actually tell us that there are projects that are ABFA funded, that they suspect malfeasance, or there is some concern that needs to be done. These are some of the criteria that PIAC uses to actually select these projects. After this, when we actually get these projects, we would write to implementing agencies. These are the ministries, departments, and agencies that these projects are being implemented under. Upon submission of these data, the committee would write to the regions that these projects are under, then to notify them of our inspection in the region, which includes our project inspection, radio discussions, fora, and other activities. So after this is when PIAC will actually embark on these inspection exercises.
So now we want to focus on the projects that the committee inspected in 2024. We know they did about 7 regions. So Mr. Friye will set the ball rolling for us and take us to that half a region and then tell us what PIAC inspected and then what exactly you guys saw when you did this inspection.
Thank you, Jessica. I think we did this inspection somewhere in June 2024. And we did about 6 or 7 projects. What I recall is that one of the projects we visited was the 3-story RCC administration block at Goso. It's also very imperative to take that. Hafu, it's actually one of the new regions. So they lead a lot of administrative structure. So PIAC is co-funding one of their administrative blocks. We visited a project. The project was there. I think it's about 70 or 80% completed. Just that we had some few fallouts, how the structure looks in terms of the walls had some peelings out of it, and some minor works were also left out. We also went to a 12-unit block bungalow for the police unit. That was also, at the time we got there, I think they were still on it, about 60% completed. The workers were on site, they were working. Third project which we visited, which I was not so happy about, was the Hafu Municipal Police Station. And that project was awarded somewhere 2-3 years ago, so like somewhere 2021, 2022. And as at the time we got there were only a foundation and some beams that have been erected. And There were a lot of excuses that the contractor has issues with the land and other stuff. So that project we're not really happy about. Apart from that, I think there was also a 2-story administration block that was also completed. I think that was about 60% also completed. And the building looked very good, although there were a few leakages at some point in terms of the roofing and other stuff. So in general, I think the projects that we set out to go and inspect, they were all available, just that we had issues with most of them, and we drew the attention of the contractors, some of them who came to visit with us, and the authorities we also went with.
Thank you, Mr. Friye, for taking us all the way to Ahafo region. We'll now move to the Volta region, and Mr. Elima will tell us the projects that the team inspected and what exactly you also saw.
Yeah, thank you very much. We inspected a few projects, and the first was the upgrade of Clefe town roads in the whole municipality. The interesting thing about this road is that it was promised by the former Vice President, Dr. Baumia, who attended a festival in the community, and then in his remarks, the chief requested that they constructed the road, and he agreed to do it. And we're also told that the regional minister at the time also hails from that community. And they believe that it is due to the influence of these two personalities that they got the road. The road had been done all right, but we noticed that there were some defects. Ghana Water Company had, left some cracks somewhere, and the water was, peeling off the bitumen on the road. And then we also went to the University of Health and Allied Sciences to inspect a number of roads, a number of projects, not just roads. But we reported on the roads because for the other projects, the school was emphatic that they were not aware that any such project was going on the campus. So we looked at the roads, though the roads were not that old, they had basically been run down somehow. And we also looked at a reinforced storm drain at Anlokoji in the Volta region, but the project had not yet been completed. And then we also went to the North Dye constituency, where we inspected the construction of an art gallery. An interesting thing about the art gallery was the DC for the community explained that these were artists, and he thought the art gallery will encourage the artisans to produce more, and then they will put them on display and then promote tourism in the area. And then finally, we went to the Vakpo Senior High Technical School to inspect some work on their kitchen. The project was in a very bad shape. The roof was almost coming off when we went there, and so on. And then finally, we looked at the pavement of Amfuega Market. The project had been done all right, and they were using it. And finally, the Agenda 111 hospital at Peve, that project was also progressing very nicely.
So from the Volta region, we would move to the Western region, where PIAC inspected about 5 projects. And Emmanuel, who was part of the team, will just run us through what the team saw when they visited these projects. So Emmanuel, the first project was the location workshop complex. What work had been done as at the time that PIAC visited?
At the time of PIAC's visit, the location workshops, 5 were completed and 2 additional ones were being constructed. And when it came to the drain, that had been completed at the time of the committee's visit. The other project that was attached to this project was the Technical Institute, which is the railway school at UMAT. And this was also completed. It included some offices and other infrastructural projects.
The second project was is a treatment and holding center at Takrade. Was that project completed as at the time you visited?
Interestingly, no. At the time of the committee's visit, the project was at 60% physical completion. And the reason for this, as the contractor told us, was because there wasn't availability of funds. There was actually a delay by the ministry, the implementing agency. And this actually caused the project to delay. But work is going on steadily at that project.
Let's move to the asphaltic overlay of Anaji Critical Collectors Racecourse and Dupal area roads in Takrade. What did the team see when they visited this particular project?
At the DuPont Racecourse and Energy Road, this was a long stretch of road which had some structural defects at the time of the committee's visits. There were some cracks at the stretch of the DuPont side of that project, and this, when the contractor was asked, he told us that it would be remedied in time since the project was not past its defect liability period.
The fourth project was the Kojo-Krom-Takwa railway line. Was that completed?
No, that project was not completed. This project, between 2020 and 2022, received substantial ABFA funding. At the time of the committee's inspection in 2019, the project had a narrow gauge system. During PIAC's visits this time around, this had been changed to the standard gauge system, but the project is going on steadily.
The final projects that the team inspected in the Western region was a construction of a Deba grounds at New Takrady. Tell us about that project too.
For the Deba grounds, what the committee noticed was that the project was not done well. There were cracks in the pavements and 50% of the project had been encroached by squatters.
So, Mr. Free, I'll come to you at this point for you to take us all the way to the Upper East region and then tell us about the committee's activities there with regards to project inspections.
So the committee did some inspection in the Upper East region. It's one of the regions which I was happy to be. And one of the projects that we visited was the Tammany Dam. I must confess that was the first time I'm seeing such a huge dam. And that dam was started in 2017. The dam was in use, but we're told there's still some work to be done. So 70% of the dam has been completed. But then, because the dam is so huge, the 7% completion is still being useful to the community. So we saw a lot of farmers having their farms around the dam and using it for irrigation purposes. It's a very huge dam, and the ABFA amount that has been sunk so far is about 250 million Ghana cedis, and that's a whooping sum of money. I must say that so far, the regions that we visited, this is one of the projects that we've had a huge sum of money invested into the project. We also went to Garu in the Upper East region, where we took the opportunity to visit Agenda 111. And that was also another very exciting project. I think about 60% completed, but we had a lot of workers on site. As at the time we visited, they were promising that in December 2024, they would complete the work. But based on how their work rate, how the workers were there, we think that they would, if not be able to complete, they would get to almost the end of it. The third project we visited was some supply of beds to the Paga Hospital, 25 hospital beds. We saw these beds, but they've been used. They didn't look as new as we were expecting it, but then these are beds that have been used, but they indicated to us that these are beds that were funded with petroleum revenue. The fourth project has a story behind it. It's a 3-classroom block. Normally you wonder why we use ABFA money for a 3-classroom block, but the story behind was that the indigenous people there at Kasina Nanka had a classroom in a mud house. So at a point, it got washed off by rains and wind, and they had to quickly get them something. So the ABFA oil my revenue came in handy, and that project has been completed and used. But there were still some defects in terms of the roofing had leakages on them. The other project we said was a construction of a clinical and doctor's resident with a clinic. And the project has been completed, well done, just that we had some few defects on the walls. But one of the things they lacked at the facility was a genset, because one of the things they do at that clinic was to provide vaccination services. And we thought that with vaccination, there was a need to have a regular supply of electricity so that when the vaccines are kept, they will be at the right temperature. So we made all those recommendations. And basically, those are the projects that we visited at the Upper East region.
It looks like we are getting some positive stories from the Upper East region, but we will now move to the Ashanti region and also hear what the team saw when they inspected projects in the Ashanti region. So Mr. Elima will do that.
Yeah, so we inspected 5 projects. The first was the Ejisu section of the N6. If you know, the N6 is the main Accra Kumasi highway. So there used to be a runabout at Boedi, the Boedi runabout there. So the idea was to expand that section of the road to decongest the entire section. And the amount used was about 17 million Ghana cedis. The project had been completed as at the time we went there. Then we also inspected a rural market at Kwaso. The interesting thing is the market women were selling in the open, and where they were selling was also not paid. So anytime it rained, the place got muddy, and it wasn't very safe for both the sellers and then those who patronize the market. So the market was constructed in 2020. It had been completed, but the mystery is that the women are not using the market. They still prefer selling outside of the main structure. And from there, we went to inspect the rehabilitated Joso Abankro Abira Road. The project was almost completed as at the time we went there. About 7 million Ghana cedis had been sunk into the project as at the time we went there. And we also inspected the CHIPS compound at PIAC. The project had not been completed. It was started in 2020. About 442,000 Ghana cedis had been sunk into the project. It had not been completed, but it looked like it had been abandoned because it was all bushy and there was no access route to the place. It looked like, everybody had forgotten about the existence of that project. The final one we looked at was the construction of a 3-unit classroom block with ancillary facilities at Wiamoasi SDA. The project was started in 2020 and it had been completed and was in use. But if you look at the project, it looked like a project that was constructed in 1970. It looked very, very old. There were no access facilities, and the design of the structure itself didn't look too modern. Yeah, even though the alpha component was about 153,000 cedis. Okay, so these were the projects that we looked at in Ashanti region.
So this is still Time with PIAC, and we are still looking at the projects that the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, inspected in 2024. We've so far looked at projects from the Western region, the Ahafo region, Ashanti region, Volta region, Upper East region. So we'll now like to move to the Central region. I think that was November. The team inspected those projects in November 2024. So Emmanuel, can you tell us what the team also inspected in the region and what they also saw?
Okay. So the team in November, as you rightly said, inspected 3 projects in the Central region. The first was the construction of a CHIPS compound at Kwekubua in the Isikuma Odobim-Brakwa district. That project, when the committee went on that inspection, was at the foundation stage, although over 100,000 Ghana cedis had been disbursed to that project. This project was ideally supposed to provide primary health care to citizens of Kwekubua and other neighboring communities. However, this project had stalled, and PIAC was highly dissatisfied with this project. So the second project that the committee inspected was a water system and a solar project in the same districts. And that project comprised the solar-powered water system. At the time of the committee's visits, this system was not working. So citizens of that neighborhood actually need to move to neighboring streams to fetch water. And they had actually complained that they were having some problems, some health complications, especially with their eyesight because of the quality of water in the neighborhood. The next project that the committee visited was the rehabilitation of Commander Town roads. This included a 5-kilometer stretch of road that was supposed to be under construction. So the scope included drains, earthworks, and sealing works. At the time of the committee's visit, the earthworks had been done, some of the drains had been completed, but none of the sealing had been done. The next project that the committee also visited was the construction of the 2020 National Flood Control Program for the Ministry of Water and Housing at Commander Zongo. So this project actually involved the dredging of 2 sides of culverts, and that had been done at the time of the committee's visit. The last project that the committee inspected in the region was the bitumen surfacing of Commander Senior High Technical Internal Roads. This also comprised earthworks, drain works, and sealing works. The same as the previous project, the earthworks had been done, the drains had been done, but the seal was not done. The team actually was not satisfied with the progress of work on this project.
So the final region we would want to look at is the Greater Accra region, where the team actually inspected 6 projects, the first one being the Agenda 111 Hospital project at Ningo Pram. And I think as at the time that the team visited, the project was ongoing and workers were on site, and the information from them indicated that they expected to complete the project by December 2024. Mind you, we inspected the project in August 2024. So whatever updates that we are getting from the team is as at the time that they visited. The second project was the upgrading of Pram Anyaman Road, and this 22-kilometer was also completed as at the time we visited, and the team actually traveled on the road. There were no defects, and the team was satisfied with the work that had been done on that particular road. The third project was the construction of a concrete drain at New Ningo. This project was also completed as at the time of the visit. The other district that the team from the Greater Accra region visited was the Shai Osudoku district. And then the team inspected a 3-unit classroom block at Dodowa Methodist School. When we visited the project site, the unit had been completed and it was in use. But then again, we saw some structural defects coming up on this particular block. We also inspected the Deba grounds at Esuchwari in the Shai Osudoku constituency. The project had been completed, it was in use. Then again, there were some structural defects, and I'm sure you see the pictures on your screen now of the projects that we inspected and the defects that the team saw as at the time of the visit. The last project for the Greater Accra region was the rural market with storage and mechanized borehole. The market was completed, but just like the case of Ashanti region, the market women are not using it and they prefer to sell in front of the market. So the stalls are empty and they have brought their wares outside and they were selling there. So this gives you a snapshot of how petroleum revenues are being used in the country. We have some being used on schools, roads, hospitals, markets, as the team has shown us. But gentlemen, I'm particularly concerned about these recurring issues that we see when we inspect projects, structural defects, funding issues, and all of that. How do we really solve these issues going forward? So Mr. Dima can start for us and then the rest will come in.
Yeah, once you start a project, it's important to identify how you are going to sustain these projects. The challenge we have is that the entire process of awarding the contract, selecting the contractor, payments and everything is basically done in Accra. And it doesn't involve the host or the beneficiary district assemblies. And in fact, in almost all the districts that I have personally visited with the team, the usual refrain is that we are not aware of the existence of this project. Even where they are aware of the project, they usually are not even aware that it is petroleum revenue that is being used to finance part of the cost of that project. So we can address the problem that you have raised by involving the district assemblies. Let them monitor the project. Let them monitor the success of the projects. Let them monitor progress of the project. And they are the best people to identify if something goes wrong. They can identify the implementing MMDA back in Accra. If it is the Ministry of Health, they can quickly alert the Ministry of Health that the contractor working on this particular health facility is not up to task, or they can alert them that, look, the rate at which the pace of implementation of the project is so slow, so something has to be done. All these things can be done by the district assembly. But in cases where we do not involve the district assembly, we cannot have the MMDAs in Accra knowing what is happening in the districts. It's almost an impossibility. So going forward, we have made recommendations in our reports, several times, that the ministries should involve the district assemblies at the point of awarding contracts for these projects, and let them be the monitors of the project, let them monitor progress of the report and of the project, and let's have a system where the assemblies will periodically be sending reports back to Accra. For instance, it can be monthly reports, monthly progress reports to Accra, so that anything that goes wrong, we can nip it in the bud, instead of waiting till PIAC goes round and does inspections and then these are brought to our attention.
Mr. Free, let me bring you in at this point. You go to the field, you see all of these things. After your inspection, what happens?
So before I answer my question, Jessica, I just want to add to the fact that with these observations that we've done with the projects, one of the things you've also noticed is that the choice of the project should be a discussion with the districts. There are projects that we've inspected that the indigenous people do not want that project. So if you don't get them involved, as my brother rightly said, and you just parachute, for a better word, a project from Accra to them, having all the things he said, having them monitor and all those things, the choice of the project is also very, very important. In choosing what kind of need or project they need is also very important. And back to your question, having seen all these key findings, we go back to the implementing agencies or the authorities who award this contract. We send our reports to them. We also send our reports to Parliament. We send some to the President. But what I would say here is that I think that the enforcement on the part of Parliament should be more. And also the implementing or the awarding agencies. When these reports come to them, they should not just sit on these reports. They should act. Because our work is to make these findings. We do not have the power to do that. So when we bring these findings out, I think that it's important that some people are sanctioned, some people are called to book, some people's license or work are stopped and revoked. Or if these things happen, there'll be some sanity in the system.
Emmanuel, would you want to add something to this particular point?
Yes, so I actually wanted to add a little bit more light to what Mr. Elima raised. One of the key issues that also recurs is the commingling of ABFA funds with other funds for project implementation. Very often you realize that there are projects that are being funded with petroleum revenue, but are also commingled with other funds. So for the ABFA project, you realize that there is GOG funding and there is ABFA funding. This makes it very, very difficult for PIAC or even for Ghanaians to assess the impact of petroleum revenues on project implementation. This is a very key issue that should be resolved. And as Mr. Ifriye rightly said, we go back to these implementing agencies with these recommendations for redress, and we also make these recommendations to Parliament.
So, gentlemen, PIAC has been inspecting these projects from 2016, that's roughly 9 years down the line. Yearly, you inspect projects, you come out with your observations, you come out with your recommendations. In terms of impact, have we seen any so far? So, Mr. Lima, in terms of impact?
Well, if we are looking at impact in terms of whether we've done any impact assessment of something like that, no. We haven't done any impact assessment. But the fact that PIAC appears in the districts, in the regions, to inspect projects undertaken with petroleum revenue, for me, that in itself, it's a huge impact. When we go to the district assemblies, you see how we are received. And you see how the DCEs and the regional ministers, how they are running all over the place, calling the various directors to come and answer questions and so on. That gives you a sense of the accountability that they want to show. That yes, we got these projects and we want to prove to you that we have utilized the monies very well by the projects. So for me, that's a huge impact. The sense of accountability, it's a very big impact. Then the second impact for me has to do with the fact that there's a lot of enlightenment now. It might not be up to where we want it to be, but there is some form of knowledge, some form of understanding of what petroleum revenues are and what they have been used for. Through all the public engagement that we have done, you meet people, ask questions, and they are giving answers. People demonstrate some ignorance at these fora, and then we give them the knowledge to quell that ignorance that they have. So knowledge that has been spread through our work is also an impact that we need to address.
Mr. Friye, impact.
So I agree with my colleague, that he said. Just to add that, I think that the other impact which I think we've made is the fact that, I think he said it, with our presence there, people get to know that even these projects are coming out of revenues from oil and gas. Most people had no idea that these are projects that have even been done by the government and this kind of funding has been used for. So some knowledge, as you rightly said, comes out. People realize that at least when we are sharing the cake in terms of the oil revenue, everybody is receiving something. Apart from the impact, I don't know whether your question will also flip to the other side where we think that there's still more work to be done. More work in the sense that I think that we need to do a revisitation of the projects that we visit so that at least we can take stock. There are times we go, we see workers there, they promise timelines and those things. We can take stock of the works that they've done and give a better report. So as you rightly said, 2016 to date, we have a number of projects we've visited. So when we take them back and see whether these things are the projects still there, have they been completed? I mean, so we could have a better assessment of the project. So that could also be something we could use as a gap to make sure whether we are impacting more with these visitations.
For a lot of people, they are interested in knowing and seeing the impact of petroleum revenues. So when you go on the field and then you see some of these things, how do you ensure that this information gets to citizens? Because trust you, a lot of people believe that it's PIAC that actually selects projects and then does the allocation and all of that. So do you make sure that information gets across to citizens?
So, sorry. So I will take it and you just come in. So during the visitation of projects, it's a mission. So we also engage the districts. We engage different bodies, different professional bodies, and we try to educate them on some of these things.
We don't just go to the communities to talk to them about petroleum-funded projects. One of our duties, though it's not outlined vividly, is to dispel all misconceptions about the use of petroleum revenue. We've encountered situations where people chase us on, our road behind our school is in a very horrible state. Can PIAC please tell government to come and do it for us? Can PIAC construct the school for us? Can PIAC do this? Can PIAC do that? So we take pains to explain to them the process of petroleum revenue allocation and what they can do to get part of the project. It's a national cake. And if you don't hold your knife closer to the cake, they will finish eating everything before you are even aware. So the best way to hold your knife close to the cake is to get close to your MP, to get close to your DCE, get close to a minister who comes from your neighborhood. Tell them that, look, this project that we want can be done with petroleum revenue. So let them go and lobby in Accra and get the MMDs, the ministries, departments, or agencies to undertake the projects using petroleum revenue. It is possible. So we give them all this education just to dispel the ignorance that they have about how petroleum revenues are used.
Emmanuel, are there other outreach programs that PIAC has in place to disseminate its findings from these inspections?
Yes, rightly so, there are. So in these public fora, we actually engage them on what PIAC has actually done over the years. We report on petroleum revenue management for the year and even since inception. We also do that through other platforms like focus groups where we engage particular section of Ghanaians. What one will do is with the persons with disabilities, we also engage market women and even other locked out communities that are not normally considered in these national discourses, including drivers, market women, tailors, and even seamstresses. And this is done to make sure that the wealth of petroleum revenue cuts across to every single citizen of Ghana. And this is very, very important for them to be able to hold these duty bearers to account.
I think just to add a few platforms, I think this particular Facebook live session is another thing that people can log on and also have information about PIAC. There's also we also have a website which is also very vibrant, and we are always updating with information. We also have the traditional media, with the TV stations where we hold sessions periodically. So these are all instruments or tools that we are able to use to disseminate our information.
I think
Yes, maybe just one thing. Our job would have been done. Our job at PIAC would have been done if every single Ghanaian is fully aware of petroleum revenue issues and can hold government accountable. Once we get to that stage, I'm sure PIAC's work would have been fully done.
Just to let you know that we have information on all these projects on our website, just like Mr. Fee said. So you can visit www.piacghana.org to have a look at the projects that we inspected. The pictures are there, the status of work, and all other information that you need on these projects are up on our websites. But finally, before I let you go, we realized that there are still challenges with the use of petroleum revenues for projects or through the annual budget funding amount. Irrespective of all these challenges, how do you see the future of petroleum funded projects? Just everybody would have a take on that. So we'll start with
Ima.
We'll start with Ima.
Yes, so looking at sustainability, the world is shifting away from fossil fuel utilization, and that is more like a threat for Ghana, which is a major oil producer within West Africa. So it is very imperative on us that we invest in renewable energy technologies.
So I would want to look at the social responsibility aspect of it. Generally, what we do as a committee is that we visit the projects as a committee. We invite journalists or the media to be part of it. I'm looking at a more broader team for these inspections, where we would have key personalities in the districts or in the regions be part of this project. So, for example, if we visit, let's say, Drabin, for example, we have the chief or one key personality there. We can have the MP visit with us. We can have somebody. We can also have the awarding authorities be part of this inspection, so that with this inspection, if you have not done the right thing, there are key stakeholders amongst us, and we book you, we could have some very serious decisions taken right and then. And also the fact that you have such a delegation visiting the project will put the contractors on their toes. That's our hope. So I'm looking at a more bigger team. I know it comes with cost, but then we are hoping that we'll have some bodies come to support us in this regard. I think my colleague will take the other bits of it.
Yeah, I think going forward, what I envisage is increasing demands for accountability, not just from government, even from PIAC. People are beginning to understand the role that we play. I remember we were on a radio program when somebody said, how can PIAC sit down for government to chop the petroleum revenue? And it is a legitimate question, because we are the more or less the police officers. We are supposed to police how petroleum revenues are used. So if we go to sleep and the corporates chop the money, then we will be held responsible. So I believe that in the years ahead, a lot more demand for accountability will fall on us, and also on government as well. Because as they put the pressure on us, we will in turn return the heat to government, hoping that government will meet its own responsibilities to its citizens.
Emmanuel, would you want to have the final word?
Okay. So we know since PIAC had been established, or the onset of the PRMA, we have not still implemented and approved a national long-term development framework. Currently, we are using the medium-term frameworks, which usually are linked to or even aligned by party manifestos. If we are able to get a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament, this will force duty bearers and the government to actually align with the national goal of government, and for that to even push developmental agendas. Currently, we know that the NDPC has developed one development framework, and that was done in May 2024. However, the committee is looking forward to Parliament to approve a long-term national development framework for this to actually be the default position of the law.
As we wrap up our conversation today, we urge you, our followers, to continue to support PIAC in our advocacy for the prudent management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. Special thanks to my guest, Mr. Richard Elima. He's a PIAC member representing CSOs. I also had Mr. Edward Yawefuye. He represents the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industries on PIAC. And then finally, Mr. Emmanuel Japon, who is the technical officer at PIAC. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and providing some perspectives on this particular subject. And to you, our audience, thank you for staying with us. We hope you found this session very educative and insightful. Remember, we remain open to your questions and comments, so continue to connect with us. You can follow us via all our social media platforms or send us a WhatsApp on 055-441-6544 as we continue to update you with information on petroleum revenue management and use in Ghana. I'm Jessica Ichampon. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.